Okay, let's get it clear. Is 2026 the year that you finally get your business making consistent sales and scaling up? Well, to quote a sports analogy, put me in, coach. I would love to mentor you through that process of establishing your business's foundations so that it is profitable, aligned, and sustainable. And my Takeoff mentorship program is the perfect way for us to do that together. Not only that, the price of the program is going up at the end of February for the first time since 2021. So make sure that you go and check out Takeoff at tashcorbin.com/takeoff before the price rise. I would love to mentor you through this process, help you to establish your consistent, streamlined strategy that attracts leads and converts them into high-ticket clients so that you can finally be paid what you deserve by this amazing business that you are building. Find out more, including the full curriculum, at tashcorbin.com/takeoff. And of course, if you've got any questions or want to discuss whether it's the right fit for you, send me an email or a DM. I'm happy to have a chat. Because I have so many conversations with business owners as part of my program delivery with my VIP clients, but also with my audience, we're constantly having conversations in the comments and DMs, I can see some patterns and trends around the types of questions people are asking. And a question that I've been asked quite a few times in the last few months is around low ticket offers and whether low ticket offers are a good strategy. At the end of the day, I can make any strategy work. If someone is particularly attached to selling low ticket offers, I can help them to make that strategy work. However, it often comes down to resourcing. So in this episode of the Heart-Centered Business Podcast, I'm going to answer the question, are you resourced enough to be able to sell low ticket offers? Because I think the reality for a lot of people is there are some resources that they need to build up or get access to first, and that is available to them through multiple different avenues rather than trying to force it all to come from one offer or one suite of low ticket offers. So this is episode number 506 of the Heart-Centered Business Podcast, which means you can find all the relevant links and the show notes for today's episode over at tashcorbin.com/506. And given how tangible and practical the self-assessment part of this might be for you, you might want to save that link. So it's tashcorbin.com/506. Let's dive in and see, are you resourced enough to sell low ticket offers? Hello, I'm Tash Corbin, a business strategist and mentor based on the Sunshine Coast in Australia. The mission of this podcast is to help heart-centered entrepreneurs to make more money, and in doing so, change the world for the better. This podcast was recorded on the lands of the Gubbi Gubbi and Jinnaburra people. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. A quick context before we dive into this episode. The process that I'm going to share with you to make that assessment is actually one that I recently did with someone on a one-on-one call. She was interested in the Takeoff program. This was towards the end of 2025. And she wanted to join the Takeoff program to learn how to sell a $47 course and have a suite of low ticket courses. The Takeoff program does not teach people how to create and launch low ticket offers. And the reason for that is we use high ticket, high conversion strategies to validate foundations very quickly as a fast track pathway to generating a profitable, aligned, and sustainable business. For a lot of people, they do the Takeoff program with the intention of moving into a low ticket model or a leveraged model or a passive income model, but they create the initial income generation, validation of their business foundations, marketing strategies, and all of the pieces that go in between through the takeoff process, which is selling high ticket. And so I had initially been talking with this person on email, and when it became clear that she was wanting to sell low ticket, but she was actually a great fit for takeoff, it's just that the product she was wanting to sell wasn't necessarily a great fit, I asked if she would be open to coming onto a Zoom call to talk about it a little bit further. And the process that we went through was just so structured that I said to her at the end, is it okay? I'll anonymize it, but is it okay if I share what we went through and the questions that we asked throughout this process? Because I think it will be really helpful for a lot of people. And of course, she said yes, hence why I'm doing this now. So this conversation was through that lens that this person wanted to start a business and she wanted her first offers to be low ticket offers. To be very explicit, I am not attached to the model that people use when they first start their business. I think that every model has a pathway to viability. However, inside the Takeoff program, it's one pathway that I help people with. And so if people are joining the Takeoff program, I want to ensure that they're across not only what the pathway is, but also why we choose that pathway and why I recommend that pathway and in what circumstances I recommend it. So the invitation that I made for this person to have a conversation was not because I was trying to convince her to change her mind, but it was to ensure that she was making an informed decision with all of the information and also making an informed decision in relation to the resources she had available to her and the results she was hoping to achieve with those resources. And so ultimately, if this person was very excited to join the Takeoff program, and so she was upset that I had initially said, well, if you're selling courses, it's not the right fit because that's not what I teach. And then she's like, but could I still apply what you teach to a course model? And so that's why I'd suggested we jump on a call. So ultimately, I discourage people from joining the Takeoff program if they aren't across what the model is that we're teaching and why, and they're not on board with that. It is a pathway to a passive and leveraged income model, but it does not teach passive and leveraged income models. It is literally getting you to the point where you're making $5,000 to $8,000 income per month from selling VIP high ticket offers and doing that in a way that's very high connection, high conversion as a way to validate your business foundations of niche, message, offer, and your marketing strategy, and create something that is scalable and does have a growth opportunity, but based on very validated foundations. And so not to get all into the weeds of that, but that was the context of this conversation. So I absolutely encourage everyone to make their own decisions about their model. And as I said, I'm not attached to the decision either way, but I want to ensure that people have all of the information to hand. The reason why I find that often takes a one-on-one conversation is because a lot of people have been seeing very shiny, very sexy, low-ticket businesses from a distance, and the pathway to profitability and sustainability and the level of sales that people are often presenting and pitching when it comes to selling low ticket offers requires a lot of resourcing or a long-term approach in that, for some people, even people who I know who started their business in the mid 2000s, like 2005, 2008, for those people who had a low ticket model to start their business, their first 2 years of business, they made under 10 grand total for the year. And so a lot of the time, this low ticket model is pitched as an easier pathway to high profit because there's less resistance to the sale on the buyer side, but there's not as much information or transparency about the resources that go into getting to that standard of sales of making, let's say $5,000 a month is the goal, right? Making $5,000 a month in sales. For a lot of people, they get excited about selling low ticket courses or passive income products because they see it as the most time efficient. If I just record the course and then I sell it 100 times, I don't have to do anything in the delivery. But what they don't consider is the time and energy and effort that goes into making the sales. And so it can often be almost the reverse that, yes, if you sell a $5,000 package, you then need to deliver that as one-to-one. That might be 10 hours of your time. It might be 20 hours of services with someone for that $5,000 sale. So it's 20 hours in delivery, let's say. But in order to sell a VIP package, often you need less leads and it takes less time and energy to make the sale because it's so much more high connection in the sales process. And so overall, that first $5,000 comes in much faster and comes in much easier when it's selling one package to one person versus trying to sell 100 spots in a $50 course. And so that's where I'm talking about resourcing and being across all of those things. So what I wanted to do was actually go through the question and answer process that happened in this conversation. And we're going to dissect each of these different types of resourcing so that you can perhaps go through this yourself to see, where do I have gaps in my resourcing that may mean a low ticket model is not quite available to me yet, based on the goals that you might have in wanting to make sales or the level of income you want to generate. So when I asked the first question I asked was, can you just tell me a little bit about why you believe your best pathway forward is to sell low ticket offers first? And her first answer was, I have the capacity to do it. And when I asked about that, what did she mean by capacity? She talked about time, right? So she has the time available to her. She was actually on maternity leave from a job and she had 6 months left of maternity leave. So she was into the rhythm of parenthood and she has a very supportive partner. So she was finding herself at a bit of a loose end and she was tossing up whether to go back to work early in 2026 or spend the last 6 months of her maternity leave trying to start a business so she didn't have to go back to work at all. So she has capacity in that she feels like she has a lot of time on her hands during the week, during her days, and using that capacity to its best effect. She felt that creating a bunch of low ticket courses and products and then selling those online would be a great way to fast track her way into a business that could pay her enough so she didn't have to go back to her job. So yes, she had time, as in she had capacity, and she had time as in she's got 6 months. So she had it on both sides. She felt like she could do 5 to 6 hours a day, 4 to 5 days a week, and still feel like she was doing everything she wanted to do at home and with her baby, and still feel like she would be, keeping up everything that she wanted to keep up around the house and still have a life and still have a social life and do all of those other things. So she had time and had capacity. So then, okay, we've got time, we've got capacity. For me, 6 months is a short window to start a low ticket business because the audience you need to build up can take a lot of time, but you can fast track that with money. So my next question was, okay, what about money? And this was where she was clear that one of her drivers for wanting to be a low ticket model was she wanted her pricing to be accessible. She wanted to ensure that what she was going to be doing with her business was available to as many people as possible. And for her, she'd done the calculations based on making 50 sales per month of her $100 to $50 to $100 courses, and that making $2,500 to $5,000 a month was a very reasonable level of income for her to continue growing. She would ultimately need it to get to 10K months, 15K months for her to not need to go back to work long term. But if within 6 months she could be making $2,500 to $5,000 a month fairly consistently, she would be very happy to delay her return to work and even quit her job. And if she had to find a job later, she would. So then I was like, okay, we need to break this down then, because in the early stages of making sales of these low ticket offers, selling 50 spots is a pretty big ask. And she said, well, I know 200 people, so I could make 50 sales pretty easily, I reckon. And especially if I had a range of different courses. So we talked through, again, the time thing. So she was thinking she could record a course every week. She could make a new course every week. They would be 5 to 6 modules. They would be self-study modules. She would set up a shopping cart and she would just release a new course every single week. So we needed to think about the reality of creation and how long it was actually going to take. But also, even if she could make a course every single week, there's not time for each of those courses to be validated, to be viable, to make sure that the messaging is going to be resonant, to ensure that the course had demand. In order to test demand, you need to have an audience. And if we apply the 1% rule, that 1% of your active audience will buy during a launch, that would mean for each course to make 50 sales, she would need to get 5,000 people on her mailing list every single month. And if we were going to fast track that audience growth with paid advertising, because she didn't have an audience of 5,000 people per month growing, that would cost $15,000 to $25,000 in ad spend to get 5,000 people on the mailing list to make those 50 sales to generate $2,500 to $5,000 in income. That is making a big loss. And so then we started to break down these numbers and get a little more generous, even if it was converting at 5%, because it was so low ticket, which still isn't something that I see consistently converting at that rate for anyone, but that's okay. Even if we went generous and went 5%, that's 1,000 people on the mailing list. So spending $5,000 a month to grow your mailing list by 1,000 people to make a maximum of $5,000 in sales, it's still a lot of work to come break out even. And over the long term, that could become more profitable. The ads could become cheaper, the audience growth could become more organic, but also she was banking on selling multiple courses to each person, but the course ideas that she had were all very specific. And so I was trying to ascertain how we could make this model work for her based on that resourcing. So we started out initially looking at how she could use the time she had to maximize the revenue and the audience growth in her business. And then she said, well, I have a friend who gets between 10,000 and 30,000 views a month on her Instagram, especially on her reels. And she's even had 2 or 3 reels that have gone viral and had 10,000 views on a reel. And so I was thinking I would use organic strategies to grow my audience by doing reels and TikToks. To which I said, okay, great, that's good. But your friend who had a 10,000 view reel go viral, what was she selling? Oh, well, she's not selling anything. Okay, so the translation of viewership of reels and TikToks into making sales isn't as straightforward as just 30,000 people, I've got 30,000 in my audience. Because for a reel that gets 30,000 views, you'll likely get between 20 and 50 new followers. And so are those 20 to 50 new followers following you because they want to buy from you, or are they following you because that funny dog video that you shared really tickled their fancy and they're hoping you share more of that? So we've really got to be mindful here about the way that the numbers can get a bit mixed up and conflated. Yes, there are people who've started a business with only organic strategies, selling only low ticket offers, and they've gone viral. They have exploded out onto the scene. But in a lot of cases, we can still find resourcing that they had that you don't necessarily have access to as the reason why that particular business exploded so quickly. So in some cases, it's because they already had an existing network that they tapped into and shared. In other cases, it might be that someone famous discovered their thing. So you're waiting for someone famous to discover your thing as your business strategy. It's building it based on the exception rather than the rule. And so when we kept unpacking and unpacking, what ended up happening was we identified that there were gaps in resourcing in pretty much every step. But every single step of resourcing could be addressed with a high ticket model. Now, ultimately, this person did choose to jump into the takeoff program and approach it with a high ticket model. I'm very excited to work with her this year. We've got some really fun stuff happening. But I just wanted to go through and review based on how that conversation unfolded, where the resourcing was needed, right? So time is definitely a resource. We have different levels of. So you need to look at your resourcing both in terms of time per week, but also how long can you sustain this without a profit? How long have you got before you need to be making real money that you can withdraw from your business without putting more money in? So number one in resourcing is time per week and extent of the time at which you can keep going before you need a viable business. But then we go into money. How much money do you need the business to be making? And how much money can you invest before it turns a profit? So we're looking at money from two different angles. And that's where high ticket can be so powerful as a pathway to low ticket, because it's generating money that will fund the low ticket strategy. Selling high ticket to a small portion of your audience is where you get the sustainability and the viability to be able to reinvest some of that money into audience growth. It's where you get the money to be able to have the resourcing you need to create the low ticket products and launch them and have that accessible pricing option. So for some people, their desire to be accessible earlier in their business means that no one ever learns that their business exists because they don't have the funding to be able to grow their audience to the people they actually want to be helping. So looking at money through both of those lenses. But then there are other resources that might be able to overcome a lack of time or a lack of money or a lack of, being able to afford to go a long time without making money, such as an audience. Do you have an existing audience or a strategy to grow your audience very quickly with highly qualified audience members? So for some people, that resourcing is their bypass. They don't need to have as much time and money because they have an existing audience. I did once work with someone who had an existing audience of 120,000 people, and she was trying to sell a $49 product to that audience, and she couldn't even make 3 sales a month continuously. And so what we had to do was actually really do a lot of validating of her messaging, her marketing strategy, but also her offer, because it wasn't quite aligned with the audience she had built. The audience she had built were following her for certain information for free, certain resources for free, and she'd trained them so well that all of those resources were available for free. So when she tried to package them up into a product for $49, people wouldn't buy it because they knew they could go and get individual resources for free. And if they stayed around long enough, she would make the resources available for free. So we needed to look at the value proposition of working with her for that audience, and also the messaging that would really resonate and land, and tap into their drivers. What would be their driver to invest? So having an existing audience can be resourcing that overcomes a lack of time and or money. But then the next part of the resourcing is the lead generation strategy. Yeah. So what is the strategy to actually generate qualified leads to buy the product? Because you don't necessarily need an audience of 120,000 people to have a viable low ticket course or a viable low ticket offer business, but you do need a way to get enough leads. And we need to be clear on what your conversion rate is from lead into purchase. And so for some people, they have the audience, but they don't have the leads. So they just need a strategy to draw leads closer and to have leads self-identify. And that can be done with some very simple but effective marketing strategies. So one of the ones that I used for the client who had 120,000 followers was running short webinars. But we picked topics for the webinars and a structure for the webinars that would only appeal to members of her audience that were already taking action, that were already on the pathway towards the thing that she was selling. And so we had to be very strategic with the messaging for that. We had to be very strategic with the decisions we made around that, because we could have made free webinars that every single person in her audience would be excited about. But then we're not actually eliminating people who aren't going to buy from that process, people who are too early in the process, people who are not taking action yet. It's just on their wish list. They're just following from a sense of aspiration rather than I'm committed to doing this thing. So there are definitely ways to make a low ticket model work. But if you aren't resourced enough to do that, you need a plan of how you're going to get resourced to do that. And for a lot of people, the most effective resourcing strategy is a foundations first approach via selling high ticket. With a high ticket, one-to-one, high connection focused approach and strategy, you will be able to validate the foundational decisions, validate your niche, your messaging, your offers, and your marketing strategy. You're making money along the way, and the sale amount per client is high. So if you're selling a VIP package of $2,000, every sale is a $2,000 sale. That is so much more income generation than most people would be able to generate with a $50 course in the first 3 months of business. And you only need to make 1 or 2 sales of that to have viability. And so making money is one of the benefits of taking the high ticket pathway to low ticket, and also scaling. You have the ability to work out your most effective scaling strategy. For some people, the most effective scaling strategy is advertising, paid advertising for audience growth. For others, it's outsourcing and bringing in team members to help with organic strategies. For others, their scaling strategy is word of mouth referrals and affiliate-based marketing. There's so many options, right? So I pride myself on the ability to make any kind of strategy work, and regardless of how fixed you are on what your product will be or what your offer will be, I am very good at finding the pathway to making it viable. But in a lot of cases, what limits people on being able to implement that is their resourcing. And that's why the Takeoff program is built on this one-to-one foundations first approach, because if someone does have a resourcing shortfall, that is often the fastest, most effective way for us to address that resourcing issue. It creates capacity, because now you've got money. You can hire people in to take over some of the workload as well, whether that be behind the scenes workload, marketing workload, delivery workload, lots of different models again, right? But you've got capacity because you've got money. You then can outsource and hire in, so it's going to free up more of your time. But you've also got capacity because you've got audience to work with. You've got the capacity to do market research because you've got people to actually do the market research with. You've got an audience. And therefore, that capacity creates the opportunity to be able to help more and more people, because you'll be able to have better business growth and sales strategy, and you'll have the money to reach the people that you want to reach. The most costly and time-intensive part of the marketing process, of the client attraction process, is the top of it, reach. It is the most expensive part of marketing, is reaching people, especially people within your audience. It's the most time-intensive part of your strategy if you're not putting money into it, because that's like organic growth, right? And I'm sure you've experienced the algorithm battles of trying to get meaningful content in front of new audiences. Often, the best way to do that is to pay for it, but you're putting that money at risk if you don't have confidence that paying for the audience growth is going to result in sales. And for a lot of people, they haven't validated that client attraction process strongly enough to have that confidence. So putting the money into audience growth feels like throwing the money away or gambling. It's putting that money at risk. We reduce the risk with every stage that we validate. The more we validate, the less risk there is in investing in growth, because it's proven and it's already generating money. For a lot of the people in the stage 3 part of the Takeoff program now, or who've graduated from Takeoff, the reason why investing in audience growth, investing in reach, investing in list growth doesn't feel like a risk to them is twofold. Number one, the money they're investing in audience growth is coming from their business. It's coming from customers. So it's not their own money that they're putting at risk. They're just taking a portion of their profit and reinvesting in growth. But number two, they know for every $1,000 they spend in ads, they make $5,000 in sales. They know for every $5,000 they spend on list growth, it's going to result in $15,000 worth of sales on the other end. And so for them, it's a money in, money out situation now, because the entire process is so validated. And they also know how to bring in short-term cash injections if the lead generation starts to dry up a little. And they know how to reinvigorate and reactivate their audience if they start to get a little disconnected and a little disengaged, right? So they've got short-term strategies as well as long-term strategies to be able to turn audience growth into money, and therefore investing in audience growth doesn't feel like a risk. And that's how I am in my business as well. Investing in audience growth, and especially in list growth, is not a risk for me, because my return per person who joins my mailing list is sky high. But the reason why it's so high is because I've validated everything. And I continue to validate with high connection, high conversion strategy. And I still to this day offer one-to-one services and packages as part of my mix of offers. And it's the work that I do with my one-on-one clients that often informs my messaging and my content, because it's such a highly valuable, highly practical and tangible conversation we're having. The one-on-one conversations I have with people who are considering the Takeoff program directly inform the content I create to attract leads for the Takeoff program. So why would I stop having one-to-one sales conversations? It seems so short-sighted to me to do that, and yet so many people have that on their list. They want to make sales without sales conversations. They want to have sales coming in on autopilot. And I do have sales coming in on autopilot, but it's never my goal to eliminate needing to talk human to human with leads, because talking with my leads one-on-one often helps me to identify where there might be a gap in my messaging. There might be some content that will really help people to understand a concept or a reasoning behind a strategic decision that I often recommend. And it's very valuable to me in my business to have those conversations one-on-one, not just because it's very high conversion and generally results in a sale, but also because of the messaging and content insights that I gain from them. So if you are considering a low ticket model or moving into adding low ticket offers to your business, I think this is such a powerful process to go through. A little self-assessment to see, do I have the time? Do I have the money? Do I have the audience? And do I have the lead generation strategy to be able to resource what I need in order for that to be a good business decision financially? And if there is a gap, using one-to-one strategies as a way of bridging that gap is so valuable, and also means that it's going to be the most time effective as well, because you don't have to go back to your job and save another $50,000. Instead, let's raise the funds from the clients that you get now, and you get those clients in on high ticket offers, one-on-one VIP packages in most cases. So hopefully you find that helpful. I know that for some people, it sounds like I'm saying you have to do one-on-one first. You definitely don't. It's just that it's a very smart decision for a lot of people. And when you've got all of that information actually laid out in front of you, you can see the logic of it, and it makes far more sense. And it's very reassuring to know it's not forever. I'm not saying you're going to have 40 one-on-one clients every single week for the rest of time in order to have a viable business. For a lot of people, making one VIP package sale per week is all they need as their baseline. And so making one sale a week of a VIP package is so much more doable than making 50 sales a month of a low ticket product every month for the rest of time. And for a lot of people, they then transition from mostly selling one-to-one to making more of their income from their leveraged and passive income products and offers. And so they reduce the number of VIPs that they need or want to be working with on a one-to-one basis or making sales to each month. I've got someone who recently graduated out of the Takeoff program, and she launched a mid-range $1,500 course, and she knows in months where she sells her course, she doesn't need to sell any VIP packages. And in months where she's not selling her course, she just needs to sell 2 VIP packages because her VIP package is $5,000 now. And so that balance is really juicy, right? And so it's so clear. Her strategy moving forward is so clear, and it stops her from having to try and feel like she has to solve every problem, to be growing hugely on socials and be growing her sales of her low ticket offers and making sure she's upselling from low ticket to high ticket and trying to keep on top of everything else. She's running a very efficient business, and it's super clear to her where to focus at what period in time. And her baseline numbers that she needs for the business to be viable are so doable. She could do it easily, and she does. And that's very exciting. We actually had a conversation recently, probably August of 2025, where she had made the decision she's going to keep with this current model for at least a year, if not 2, until such time as she's $100,000 saved in her business bank account as her buffer. And then once she's got that, she's going to look at her next growth strategy. That decision she's made because kids at home and workload and other factors coming into it. But what a powerful, amazing strategic CEO decision to say, you know what? I've landed at a stage in business where for very little time, I'm making the amount of money that I was aiming to try and make. And I'm going to solidify this as my baseline income model over the next year or two and get that as streamlined and smooth and amazing as possible. And then I can make a decision on where to from there. One of the slight tweaks that I made to that decision for her was to keep investing in list growth, mailing list growth, even from now. So she's spending about $450 a month in ads on Facebook to grow her mailing list, even though that list growth isn't necessarily for a specific short-term sales goal. It's actually so that in 18 months to 2 years' time, she'll have multiple thousands of people on her mailing list that she has grown and built over time. Time is one of the biggest things you need to grow your mailing list, because you can't go from no spend on ads to $10,000 spend on ads and have that be sustainable. You've got to grow your spend on ads even slowly, and it takes time. The faster you try and fast track list growth from ads, the more it costs you per person who joins your list. There's a sweet spot that you get to, and now you just have to sit and play the waiting game. So she's doing that as well, and that's making me very excited. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how that all unfolds for her. But you can see there, like, it's not always about being in a rush to get to the next model, or it's not always about having to get the $1 million business in the next 6 months. Sometimes the decision is to focus on like minimizing the hours required to keep the income level the same, and in the meantime, building up that resourcing. And having that resourcing behind you makes a significant difference to the options that are available to you to be able to fix some of the gaps that might come to light in your client attraction process, to fix some of the gaps that might appear when you go to launch a low ticket course and the sales results just weren't what you were expecting. And so resourcing makes a world of difference. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Heart Centered Business Podcast. If you're interested in learning more about the Takeoff program, I'll pop the link in the show notes of the episode over at tashcorbin.com/406. The Takeoff program is actually going up in price. And so if you are interested in learning the high ticket, high conversion model of business growth and getting to the stage of having a profitable, aligned, sustainable business, then the Takeoff program is the best way for us to do that together in most cases. So please do come and check that out. And if you've got any questions about Takeoff, you want to have a chat and see if it's the right fit for you, just reach out using the contact form over there as well. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. Until next time, I cannot wait to see you shine. Bye for now. A quick reminder before you go that the Takeoff program is going up by $500 on the 27th of February. So come and check out the program, see for yourself just how comprehensive it is, and of course, get enrolled if you feel like it's the right fit for you at tashcorbin.com/takeoff.